While enjoying their vacation in Italy, a young family from Denmark crosses paths with a welcoming Dutch couple accompanied by a child who cannot speak. Several months after this serendipitous encounter, an unforeseen invitation arrives, inviting them to spend a weekend at the country house of these newfound friends. However, what initially appeared to be a delightful getaway slowly morphs into an unsettling and disturbing experience. Under the veil of night, a car traverses a rustic, unpaved road. Trees whisk by, briefly illuminated by the car's headlights. After a while, the vehicle halts and a man and a woman alight. In utter silence, they commence unloading their baggage from the car. The scene transitions, and we find ourselves in the radiant Italian daylight, where a grand hotel stands with an expansive swimming pool, surrounded by families on vacation. Among them is a married couple, Bjorn and Louise, leisurely reclining on sun loungers while their daughter Agnes joyfully frolics in the pool. A stranger approaches the couple and politely inquires if he may share a vacant lounger with them. Afterward, we fast forward several hours, finding Bjorn and Louise preparing for a formal dinner. They entrust Agnes to the care of a nanny as they get ready. During the dinner, the unfamiliar couple from the pool captures everyone's attention. Bjorn realizes that the man is the same stranger from the pool. He raises his glass in a toast, expressing his admiration for the company and his desire to become better acquainted with everyone. The next morning, Bjorn, Louise, and Agnes set off on a city tour. Along the way, Agnes loses her favorite toy, and Bjorn has no choice but to go back, asking passers-by if they've seen her stuffed bunny. Eventually, he manages to find the lost toy. When he returns to his family, he sees the same couple from the dinner the previous night standing with them. The strangers also have a child with them. The young people get acquainted. The man's name is Patrick and his other half is Corinne. Their son is named Abel and he is slightly younger than Agnes and hardly speaks. Together, they decide to have lunch. During the meal, Louise doesn't eat meat as she is a vegetarian. Patrick fully supports her choice, believing it helps improve the environment. The families like each other and the conversation continues. However, the vacation comes to an end and everyone returns home. But soon, Bjorn finds an unexpected letter in the mailbox, inviting them to visit Patrick, Karen, and Abel for a weekend in the Netherlands. It's certainly unusual to receive such an offer from people they barely know, but Bjorn can't stop thinking about it. One evening, while having dinner with friends, he tells them about the new acquaintances from their summer vacation. In the end, after weighing the pros and cons, and with the encouragement of their friends, Bjorn and Louise decide to accept the invitation. Soon, our heroes set off for the Netherlands. When the family finally arrives at the countryside home of their new acquaintances, the hosts warmly welcome them and help with their luggage. The guests are shown their room. Patrick offers Bjorn a beer and invites him to see his pool, while Karen leads Louise and Agnes to greet Abel. The boy continues to remain silent, and Karen shows Agnes the bed they've prepared for her. It looks a bit strange as Karen refers to the bare mattress lying on the floor as but Louise decides not to focus on it and deal with it later. For dinner, roasted suckling pig was prepared. Patrick cuts the first piece and offers it to Louise. He politely insists until Louise finally takes a fork and takes a small bite. After dinner, Bjorn is asked to take out the trash to the bin outside. When he goes out onto the veranda, he encounters Abel. Not knowing how to act, Bjorn smiles and looks at the boy. Abel first looks around, then opens his mouth wide. Bjorn notices that the boy is missing a tongue. The evening continues, and the young people continue to chat. However, Bjorn and Louise notice that they can hear Abel's screams. Seeing that the parents are not paying attention to this, Bjorn asks if everything is okay with the boy. Patrick and Karen reassure them that everything is fine. And for Abel, this is normal behavior, and he will fall asleep in a minute. His behavior is due to a congenital condition called aglossia, where a child is born without a tongue. After the evening is over, everyone goes to their rooms. Bjorn and Louise take Agnes to bed with them and turn off the light. The next morning, the whole group goes for a walk in the field. When they reach a playground, the adults stop to talk, and Agnes climbs up a children's slide and does not respond to her requests to move. Calling her mom, she still does not get the desired result, as Abel continues to ignore Louise's requests. In that case, the woman decides to approach the boy's parents, trying to be as polite as possible to ask and persuade their son to step aside, even for a moment. After hearing her request, Patrick and Grilly gets up and approaches the boy. He rockily pulls him off the slide and demands an apology from his son. He returns to the group to continue the conversation. Bjorn and Louise, taken aback by this behavior, are slightly stunned, but they have no choice but to try to continue the interrupted conversation. Later, back in the house, Louise takes Bjorn aside and declares that she wants to leave because their new acquaintances are very strange. They are interrupted by Karin, who enters the room and invites them to dinner at a local restaurant that evening. The couple agrees. When Karin leaves the room again, Bjorn smiles at his wife and whispers that they can endure it for another day and a half in any case. In the evening, as they prepare to go to dinner, Louise dresses their daughter, but she is very surprised when she sees Abel walking by undressed. Not understanding what is happening, Louise asks Karin about it. Karin looks surprised and claims that they had no plans to bring the children. At the same time, an unknown man enters the house, whom Karin introduces as a very good caregiver. Patrick is already hurrying everyone from the car. With a heavy heart, Louise decides to leave Agnes with the caregiver and Abel and steps outside following everyone. Sitting in the car, Bjorn and Louise feel awkward and tense as Patrick and Karin, who are sitting in the front, talk to each other in Dutch, completely ignoring their guests. In the restaurant, Patrick takes charge of ordering dinner since the menu is in a language unfamiliar to Bjorn and Louise. Louise only reminds him that she is a vegetarian, as she cares about the environment. Patrick agrees, though he mentions that she doesn't refuse fish, despite the impact of fishing and ocean pollution on the environment. Tension fills the air, which Bjorn tries to diffuse by suggesting they raise their glasses. Gradually, the company gets drunk, relaxes, and now Patrick and Karin are already dancing a slow dance, slightly snuggling up to each other and timidly kissing. Watching this cute scene, Bjorn invites Louise to dance, approaching the dancers. They also begin to dance, but gradually they stop liking it because Patrick and Karin are no longer shy about hugging, stroking each other and moaning with passion. After dinner, Patrick playfully looks at the bill and is amazed by its size. Bjorn suggests contributing to its payment. When he takes out his credit card, he realizes that Patrick is simply standing there, waiting for the guest he invited to pay for everyone's dinner. Bjorn has no choice but to do so. Having finally arrived home, Louise and Bjorn see their children peacefully asleep. Before going to bed, Louise decides to take a shower. While standing in the shower cabin, she suddenly hears the bathroom door opening, someone entering, and starting to brush their teeth. Frozen in fear and surprise, she listens as the person walks around the bathroom until they finish brushing their teeth and leave. Already lying in bed, Bjorn and Louise decide to make love. They do not react to the voice of their daughter, who asks to sleep with them, but Bjorn notices Patrick, who is watching them through the glass from the corridor, and then slowly leaves. After everything is over, Louise goes to the nursery to her daughter, but sees only Abel sleeping there. Agnes' mattress is empty. In search of her daughter, she quietly looks into the host's bedroom and sees a sleeping Patrick barely covered with a blanket, and a sleeping Karin. Agnes is sleeping between them. Louise takes her daughter, brings her to their bedroom, and wakes up her husband, demanding to go home immediately. They quietly gather their things, leave the house, get in the car, and drive away. On the way, they realize that their daughter left her stuffed bunny in the house. Agnes's childlike tantrum forces Bjorn to turn the car around and go back to the house. He tells his family to stay in the car, exits, and heads towards the house, not seeing Agnes find her toy, which had fallen under the seat. Frustrated, Louise asks her daughter to stay in the car while she goes into the house after her husband. Entering the house, she hears the voices of the men. As she walks to the kitchen, she realizes that Patrick is asking Bjorn for an explanation for their sudden departure. Karin enters, and the situation becomes quite awkward. Bjorn explains that there are certain reasons that compelled them to act this way. Patrick demands specifics. Collecting her thoughts, Louise and Bjorn express everything they didn't like. As a result, Patrick and Karin apologize, ask them to stay, and promise that the upcoming day will be just great for everyone. Their words seem so sincere that the guests decide to stay. The day begins. The children play with a ball, the women work in the garden, the men go by car to buy groceries, and everyone tries to act as before. Patrick apologizes to Bjorn once again and admits that he sometimes changes, but he can't do anything about it. Admits that he often has to restrain himself and constantly smile to everyone. Patrick invites him, wanting to show something. They come to a sand quarry where they simply shout into the sky, letting out all their emotions. Then they go to the sauna, have lunch together, and enjoy a good mood. Suddenly, Louise cuts her finger, and Bjorn asks Patrick to examine the wound since he is a doctor. Patrick categorically states that he is not a doctor and has never worked as one. He has never worked at all, and he simply deceived them about being a doctor. During lunch, Louise begins to notice that Karin constantly reprimands Agnes for any reason. In the end, Louise loses her temper and tells Karin to stop bossing her daughter around. After lunch, the children prepare to dance performance for the adults. Suddenly, Patrick turns off the music and angrily scolds Abel for dancing poorly. He turns the music back on and asks them to repeat, but the same happens again after a few seconds. Patrick's aggression escalates gradually. He starts shouting at his son, pulling and pushing him. When Agnes joins her mother, saying she doesn't want to dance anymore, Patrick insists that she comes back because they are a duet. Bjorn and Louise are unsure of how to react, but they decide to ask Agnes to try one last time. The dance begins, and after a few seconds, Patrick throws a glass at his son, which he had used for drinking tea. Agnes jumps into Louise's arms, and Patrick turns on the stereo again, making the crying Abel dance alone. Bjorn can't take it anymore. He takes the stereo from Patrick's hands and turns it off. He is outraged, asking if it's even acceptable to treat a child like that. However, Patrick and Karen don't understand him. Karen claims that this is how they raise their child and doesn't comprehend the guest's seemingly irrational behavior. In the evening, Bjorn is brushing his teeth in the bathroom before bed. Suddenly, Patrick enters, goes to the toilet, and starts using it for a bowel movement. The situation is quite strange and uncomfortable, considering that the men are almost strangers. At night, Bjorn hears Abel crying again and Patrick scolding him loudly. Additionally, the sound of the television fills the entire house. Bjorn gets up, leaves the bedroom, and quietly walks through the dark house, not seeing any of the hosts anywhere. From the kitchen window, he notices the open door of the house opposite theirs, flapping in the wind. Since he has never been there before, Bjorn goes outside and heads towards the house, thinking he might meet someone from their group there. Crossing the threshold of the small house, he sees numerous cameras laid out on many shelves. As he climbs up to the attic, he notices that all the walls are covered with photographs. Bjorn takes a closer look at the photos and realizes with horror that they depict Patrick and Karen, as well as other young couples, like him and Louise. He sees that the couples have children, and the boy with Patrick and his wife is always different, not Abel. In other words, Bjorn realizes that he and Louise are far from being the first guests of this strange couple. He walks out of the house and heads towards the sauna, where he notices a light. Upon looking inside, he sees Abel's lifeless body in the pool. Returning to the bedroom, he wakes up Louise and Agnes, urging them to pack up and go home without telling them what he saw. Quickly stepping into the yard, they get into the car and drive away. On the way, Bjorn notices that a car is following them. They can't shake it off, and instead, the car gets stuck. Stepping out of the car, the man looks around. Spotting a distant house, he asks the girls to lock themselves in, and he runs for help. Sitting in the car with the headlights turned off, 50 meters away from the fleeing man, unnoticed by anyone, Patrick watches him with an angry look. Having reached the house, Bjorn finds no one there. Upon returning to the car, he still doesn't find anyone inside. Shouting the names of his wife and daughter, he starts walking along the road when suddenly the headlights from an approaching car illuminate him. The car stops next to him, and Patrick emerges, heading toward Bjorn. Inside the car are Louise, Agnes, and Karen. Louise thanks Karen for her help. When Bjorn asks Patrick to release them and their family, Patrick insists that Bjorn should calm down and follow their instructions, and then no one will be harmed. The car continues to move. After a while, Agnes starts to fuss. Louise tries to calm her down, but suddenly Patrick orders her to be quiet. Louise can't believe her ears at first. Bjorn quietly asks her to comply. Louise doesn't understand what's happening and insists that they have been driving for too long. At this point, even Karen drops her facade of friendliness and rudely tells Louise to be quiet as well. They soon come to a stop, and another car meets them. Patrick forcefully demands that the women remain silent, and he physically assaults Bjorn, hitting him several times in the face. Another person, who seems familiar from the other car, steps out and opens the passenger door on Louise's side, restraining her. Meanwhile, Corinne forcibly opens Agnes's mouth and removes her tongue using scissors. Afterward, the caregiver takes the young girl out of the car. They swiftly drive away, locking the doors to prevent Louise from following her daughter. Finally, the car comes to a halt. Patrick and Karen exit the car and instruct their guests to do the same. Bjorn and Louise slowly step out of the car. They are told to undress and descend into a nearby ditch, which they do without uttering a word. At the bottom of the ditch, they embrace and begin to bid their farewells. The first large rock thrown from above strikes Louise in the head, causing her to fall. Bjorn bends over her, but a second stone hits him, rendering him unconscious. The sadistic individuals continue to pelt them with heavy stones. This brutal assault continues until both Bjorn and Louise show no signs of life. Morning arrives, and the lifeless bodies rest at the bottom of the quarry. Louise's lifeless gaze is fixed upon the sky. In the final scenes, we see a seemingly happy couple, Patrick and Karen, driving on a sunny day for a vacation. Their daughter is in the back seat, but she is mute due to a congenital condition known as glacia, which means she was born without a tongue.